Hello everybody, welcome back to another review in the On Wax review series. Today I'm going to be talking about an album that I have been teasing a review for quite some time now, at least the past few weeks. And that of course is Wall of Eyes by The Smile, the supergroup formed by Radiohead's Thom, Yorke, and Jonny Greenwood, along with Sons of Kemet drummer Tom Skinner. This is their second project that they've come out with, their first being A Light for Attracting Attention, which came out in 2022, which is an album I liked, a fair amount. And this one, I will say, I liked a fair amount as well. It certainly feels like an expansion of what they had already done on their previous record. But I'm not really sure how much more I like this one compared to that, and we will get into that, obviously. But first off, it's really nice to be getting music from Thom, Yorke, and Jonny Greenwood, of course. Obviously Radiohead hasn't put anything out in almost 10 years at this point, which is kind of crazy to even consider. So this is obviously has served as a nice creative outlet for these two, as well as Tom Skinner. And I think this pairing definitely is an interesting one at that. I think especially with Tom Skinner, because you get a lot of really, really jazzy drumming. Of course, Sons of Kemet is a jazz type of ensemble, and I think his sensibilities bring a lot to this record, especially the first track, the title track, that is, Wall of Eyes, a very acoustic, bossa nova-esque track, and there's a lot of eerie strings and pounding drums on it, and also flutes. It feels a bit aimless by the end of the track, though. Like, yet again, and I'm going to be saying this for a lot of this album, I appreciate a lot of the musicality of this, but even so, I don't think melodically speaking this really stands out to me in any way, and lyrically as well, because one of the big issues I had with the first Smile album is Thom Yorke's vocals are just drowned in so much reverb that I can't really understand what he's saying half the time. And yet again, I might have some problems with Radiohead in that sense, but Radiohead records, there's something much more primal about them, something much more crisp. Maybe it's just the accent when it comes to the Radiohead records. I end up appreciating those albums a lot more. I listened to this album a couple of times, and even on this track, it's still kind of hard to understand some of what Thom was saying. And then of course you get to Telharmonic, which features a lot of building cymbals, synthesizers, both in the middle of the track, and there's a lot of flutes flying around the mix, but nothing yet again melodically or lyrically grips me. Very, very similar issues, I think, in a lot of ways to a lot of this album. But Read the Room is one that I think is a real standout on this record. It features some very math rockian guitar parts from Jonny Greenwood, which really, really stand in stark contrast with the rest of this album. There's a lot of driving snares and booming bass. There's a really interesting middle breakdown in this song that sounds very whimsical, with the organs, the acoustic guitar, and the flute all playing together in this one section. And this is a song that my good friend John Stanek would say that they're going sexy on, because it is a really, really sexy track, I think. And the way the end breakdown is driven by, the electric guitar and very plucky bass and drums on top of it, it really, really stands out. Easily one of my favorites on this album for sure. Sure, it's not as good. Yet again, it's kind of hard not to compare this to Radiohead, because it is very similar in a lot of ways. But I suppose even, comparing it to The Smile, I don't think this quite stands out in the way that some of the most fully realized songs do, but it's still a great song nonetheless, especially from a structural standpoint. So I absolutely did love that track on this record. And then we get to Under Our Pillows, which features a very John Frusciante-esque staccato guitar riffs at the beginning from Greenwood that kind of reminded me of something off of Californication, if anything. But I did appreciate that playing style nonetheless. It really does make it stand out musically on this album. And I think that this features some of the most jazzy freeform drumming on this entire record, and I think those sensibilities from Thom Skinner really shine through on this track in particular. The second half of the song where Thom starts singing about like saying episodes wiped clean, it's just as dreamlike as what he's talking about, and how essentially, you know, in our dreams we escape and we have all these things that we imagine, some of which might not even come true. I think lyrically this is a really a great song, definitely one of the standouts on the album. And the build of the bass and the drums is extremely propulsive on this track, but my problem is the build on the last minute and a half I find to be a bit unnecessary. So this really could have been the standout song, or maybe second standout song on the record. I just feel like they get a little self-indulgent, which makes sense. You know, there isn't really any pressure on them with, you know, not having the Radiohead brand on this album. But I definitely think it does run a bit too long, and I think that the track overall suffers because of it. And then you get Friend of a Friend, which is very sparse to begin with Thom's beautiful voice and the bass just playing at the beginning as the pianos, drums, and some other, you know, instruments join in as the song plots along. Some really interesting meter shifts too. I mean, of course, this is nothing new. If you've heard anything off of Amnesiac in particular, definitely not a surprise, but certainly a very welcome mix into the song, structurally speaking. You know, it's very Sgt. Pepper-esque. I think, especially with the brass coming in the middle and the swelling strings, it definitely reminds me of something like A Day in the Life in a lot of ways. And yet again, it's a very interesting mix of a lot of different things. And also just the comment on, you know, Thom being in Italy and seeing, you know, people waving from each other's balconies during COVID. And, you know, a lot of the song kind of has to do with being stuck up and sharing music with people. And I think that's a really beautiful sentiment. I think structurally the song is pretty great. I wouldn't quite say that I love it, especially yet again, it comes to the point with the mixing. I'm not really as huge on it, but I do appreciate a lot of this song musically, and I definitely think, yet again, there isn't much on this album that I can't commend for being very well made. There's just elements of that I don't find to be particularly memorable, or, you know, yet again, it all comes back to the mixing of the vocals too, which is a big issue, and I think that does play into this song, unfortunately, but still, I think it's a really good song on this album, and it's certainly worth a listen, especially if you're going to listen to this whole thing. But let's be honest, you are going to listen to it if you're watching this review. But yeah, definitely a strong track on this record, though not one of my personal favorites. And then you get I Quit, which features some chopped up acoustic guitar and mild piano to kick the song off, and some distorted snare hits that really definitely stood out to me on this track. Some of the most interesting and abrasive production, I would say, on the entire album, mixed with some very beautiful orchestral segments. And of course, I really love the message of the song, finding peace and acceptance and moving forward in your life. It really does, you know, stand out in that way. But yet again, it's like, as much as I appreciate the song, it isn't one that I fully love, because melodically it's just not going to be something that I'm going to particularly get stuck in my head. And then we get to the first single off this album that I actually waited until I heard this album to listen to, which is Bending Hectic, which far and away is the masterpiece of this album. This song is incredible, and I love the chromatic guitar patterns to start the song off from Jonny Greenwood, and Tom Skinner's very sporadic yet controlled drumming really drive this thing forward. And so much to love about this song. It really does feel like an expansion of No Surprises off of OK Computer, lyrically speaking. Especially considering what Thom is talking about, you know, driving off a cliff and then trying to wonder if you're going to go crashing down or take that turn and prevent it from happening, even though you may be at a point in your life where you don't really mind letting go, but something still tells you to keep going forward. It's really dark and it's very depressing, but I think it's certainly an interesting look at things, especially considering that these guys are almost in their, you know, 60s now, And, you know, looking back, it seems like they're still exploring the same territory, but in very new ways. And I absolutely love the ethereal strings that come in here. Just the sliding and atonal nature of them really, really just explodes in your ear in the best ways possible. It really makes me feel like I'm watching a Stanley Kubrick film or something. You know, a lot of his score is very similar if you think of like 2001 or The Shining, for instance. But yeah, this really is far and away, you know, it's over 8 minutes long, and it's an epic to end all epics, and I think easily the centerpiece of this album. Definitely one of the best songs from the group thus far, and certainly a song that I think deserves a lot of acclaim that it has been getting. And that will take us to the final closing track on this album, which is You Know Me, and it consists of a very Eastern type of vibe. You know, it definitely gives that off, which is very fitting to the idea of the song, which is about being taken for granted by someone else and trying to like let go of that and be free of that sort of constriction that you may have with a single person and not let it affect your life or, you know, leave them in it. Sort of brings you to a meditative state, which I think that this song really does. Don't love it, but yet again, there's always something on all of these tracks to appreciate. But I just don't find it to be particularly memorable in a lot of ways. And people are like, oh, well, you know, grow on you. But look, I listen to it a couple times, and usually when I listen to something a couple times, I have a fair idea of how I feel about it. Granted, this isn't always the case, but this is a time where I'm like, yeah, it's not going to stand out to me much more in the future. I definitely would say that I almost really enjoyed it, but I kind of had to compare it to their last album, and I think overall there was some more innovative stuff on their last record, and I just don't understand the insistence on all the reverb. That's really what's bringing my score down by like half a point more than anything. And on that note, I'm going to give Wall of Eyes a 7 out of 10. Definitely a really, really solid album, which you should all check out, especially if you're fans of The Smile and of Radiohead. But it isn't anything to really go home about, in my opinion. I appreciate what the boys are doing. It's a really creative and interesting project, but not one that I think is going to make a huge dent in the way some of the members' previous works have had it done so in the past. But definitely check it out if you are interested in this album. It's worth a listen, obviously. It comes with a very solid recommendation from me. And that is the review of Wall of Eyes by The Smile. Let me know what you thought about the album down in the comments below. Of course, smash the like button. Subscribe to this channel if you want to see more reviews like this. There's going to be a lot of albums coming out from some pretty huge artists, which I obviously am very excited about. I'm not going to promise reviews on every single one, because if I don't end up liking it, I want to be constructive but not too harsh. You know, that's something I've been, you know, working on when it comes to some of these reviews. But there's so much music coming in the near future that I cannot wait to talk about, and I hope you stay tuned for all the movie stuff that we're doing. Of course, the Oscars are coming up, so it's about time that I share with you guys my top 10 movies of 2023. This should be coming within the next 3 weeks or more. So definitely stay on the lookout for that. I get excited every year about that. And stay tuned with everything else happening on the channel, like the top 50 albums of the 50s countdown that I'm doing between myself and Jonny Radio in his channel. It's going to be a great time. If you haven't participated in it before, I will leave a link for you to check out the details on this countdown, and so you can contribute your list if you so choose to. And yeah, guys, that's going to be it for today's video, and I can't wait to talk to you guys next time. So have a good one, and we'll talk soon.